Let's talk more about Sergeant Bo Bergdahl's release and the transfer of 5 detainees from Guantanamo Bay to Qatar with 2 CNN commentators, Ben Ferguson and Mark Lamont Hill, joining me to share some of their thoughts. Good to see you guys. So, Ben, let me start with you first on this one. The U.S. has been given assurances, they say, that the men exchanged for Bergdahl will not pose a threat to the United States. They won't even be allowed to leave Qatar for a year. Do those assurances offer you any comfort?
Not at all. I mean, these are high-level individuals that were so important that for 5 years, the same men were on the list of what they wanted back in exchange for an American. And this has changed our entire policy, almost 50 years of policy, that we do not negotiate with terrorists, and that's exactly what just happened. And that makes the life of an American around the world skyrocket, and how important it is to al-Qaeda or anyone else, because we just changed our policy. And these aren't low-level guys. You don't get to Guantanamo Bay by accident. And if the Taliban wants you back and you're on their list, think about how important these guys are, obviously, to the Taliban and what they want to accomplish. And this was a massive victory for them today. And America just gave in to the Taliban and gave their top people back they wanted. That's scary.
Mark, Senator John McCain.
I strongly disagree here.
Okay, I'll share. Let me tell you what Senator John McCain said, and then I'll let you weigh in. He says that he's concerned about these former detainees, and the House Intelligence Committee chairman saying that this deal gives terrorists an incentive to take more American hostages. So why don't you respond to Ben, but also I'd like your reaction to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is certainly cause for concern. We should be asking questions about the nature of these negotiations. But as we know, we've been negotiating for well over a year on these very points. How many hostages would be released? How many prisoners would be released? What the terms of release would be? Who would be the intermediary in the conversation? This is not something that went along quickly. Clearly, the president, as well as his cabinet, have made very thoughtful decisions about this. I can't wait to get more information, and the American people are entitled to that information. But this, and this is where I disagree with Ben, this was not a victory for the Taliban today. This was a victory for America. This was a victory for a soldier who was a hostage, and it was a victory for his family. And we have to look at it in that way, I think. And also, as our national security advisor said, or expert said just a few minutes ago, this is not a clear-cut case of talking to reimagine who the Taliban are, number one, and number two, we have to move into a place of negotiation and conversation, not merely this sort of hostile, antagonistic engagement that we've had for the last 5 years or 10 years.
But I think the biggest difference is these people are the same people they've been wanting for 5 years, and they wanted them back badly. And so to say that this isn't a victory for the Taliban today, if it wasn't a victory for them, they wouldn't have made the deal. They gave away 1 American for 5 of their top people in their political organization. If that's not the definition of a victory, I don't know what is. A 5-for-1 trade is an incredible deal for 5 guys that were in Guantanamo Bay, in the words of John McCain, have American blood on their hands. And this puts other American people around the world's lives at risk now with al-Qaeda, with the Taliban, because they know that America now will negotiate. And if you've got another 10 guys or 5 guys you want out, well, if you grab a couple of Americans, are we willing to play ball? Based on what we see today, we absolutely are.
All right, guys.
But that's a
very quickly, Mark.
It's just a very reductive analysis. First of all, only 1 American in Afghanistan was captured, so it's not as if there were 5. We're not the LA Clippers making bad trades here. This was a very different circumstance. And also, all 5 of those guys were not top-level officials. There were 2 who were significant.
That's why Mark Lamont Hill, Ben Ferguson, thank you both. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. You are in the CNN Newsroom. I'm Randy Kay, in for Don Lemon. President Obama just had 2 special guests with him in the White House Rose Garden. The mother and father of Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, the soldier who had been held captive by the Taliban for nearly 5 years. Today, the president surprised them with the news that their son was coming home. The deal was made, 5 terror suspects being held in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, in exchange for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. A few hours ago, U.S. Special Forces picked him up, and he is safe at a base in Afghanistan.
Sergeant Bergdahl has missed birthdays and holidays and the simple moments with family and friends, which all of us take for granted. But while Bo was gone, he was never forgotten. His parents thought about him and prayed for him every single day.
We will continue to stay strong for Bo while he recovers. Thank you.
And joining me now, Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr, senior international correspondent Nick Robertson in London, and former war correspondent and documentary filmmaker Mike Betcher. Good to see all of you. Barbara, this means that there are no longer any American troops being held captive from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I would imagine there is some sense of celebration about that at the Pentagon today.
Well, I think that everyone is very pleased, very happy that Bo Bergdahl is finally out, free, and on his way home to his family. There is no question about that. This is a place where lives by the motto, leave no one behind. They take it very seriously, regardless of circumstances. Everybody comes home. And the president referred to that even about when he spoke about those still missing from previous conflicts, about Americans, civilian Americans being held overseas in a number of countries. The U.S. believes very unjustly. The idea is that this should not happen to anybody. Bergdahl's case, very delicate, however, very sensitive. We do not know what happened with this young man. Almost 5 years ago, the word was that he walked out of his base in eastern Afghanistan and was quickly kidnapped by the Taliban. But nobody's ever heard from Bo Bergdahl as a free man to tell the world what happened to him. Certainly, Army officials are going to be talking to him in the coming hours, trying to get some idea of what did happen. But right now, the real priority is to get him all the medical care he needs, any counseling, any assistance, any repatriation assistance back into Western society, and get him home to his family.
And Nick, there's certainly another side to Bergdahl's release today. I mean, 5 men who were detained at Guantanamo now free as well. What do you know about the backstory of how this exchange went down?
We know that the Taliban have been demanding the release of these 5 people in Guantanamo Bay. They're 5 senior Taliban figures. One of them was a former deputy defense minister, one a former interior minister, one a former deputy head of intelligence, another a governor of 2 different provinces under the Taliban. They're not believed to have had connections with al-Qaeda, but this is the way that the Taliban operates. It captures people. It's done this in Pakistan, it's done it in Afghanistan, and then demanded the release of their own prisoners who are being held by those particular governments. So this is perhaps nothing new, but it's been in the works for a couple of years. It's stalled on a number of occasions, but now with the help of the Qataris as the middlemen, building confidence on both sides, making this happen, not direct talks, indirect talks, again using the Qatari middlemen, it has actually worked this time. There are probably very many things that could have gone wrong. Fortunately for everyone, it didn't this time.
Yeah, very fortunate. Mike, you spent some considerable time in Afghanistan for your documentary Hornet's Nest. You're familiar with that frontier on the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. I mean, is that a place where you can hide a captive for 5 years easily?
Well, you can hide them easily across the border in Pakistan in North Waziristan province, because that is a strictly no-go zone. The Pakistani army doesn't even go there. And as Nick mentioned earlier, there have been many al-Qaeda and Taliban training bases there because of the U.S. drone program, the drone attacks in that area that really killed a lot of top leadership in North Waziristan from the Haqqani network, which I guess the way to describe Haqqani network is Taliban on steroids, frankly. They had to break up in smaller camps, and he was likely kept in one of those smaller camps and moved around. But along the frontier and coast in Paktika province, the few U.S. soldiers we had along that area always had their eye out, but it was always suspected he was in North Waziristan.
And for Barbara, just for the viewers who might just be joining us, I mean, just share again, if you would, that moment that you told us all about much earlier today, about when Bo Bergdahl was on that helicopter with the commandos and what happened.
Well, what we are told by several U.S. defense officials, they got him very quickly onto the helicopter. Military helicopters are very noisy. You can't really talk on board them. You use hand signals or write notes. Apparently, we are told, Bo Bergdahl wrote down on a paper the initials SF with a question mark, meaning Special Forces, "Are you guys special forces?" And the troops that had come to rescue him said, "Yes, we are. We have been looking for you." And at that point, we are told that Bowe Bergdahl broke down. I've talked to folks about this here at the Pentagon this afternoon. They take it as a very good sign after all this time. If he wrote down SF, if he still had the comprehension, the understanding, the memory to realize special forces, and that it was most likely special forces that had come to get him in such dire circumstances, actually folks here take it as a good sign that he may be in a good place in understanding what has happened to him.
And Mike, I mean, I'd like you to react to that, because what's your read on that? I mean, you've been in his shoes. You were taken as well.
You know, it's a traumatic experience. It's going to take a while to come back from that dark period. It took me a while to come back from it. You live each day in the hands of someone else. They feed you. They're the ones that give you shelter, and they're the ones who can decide if you're going to live or die. And then the Stockholm syndrome develops, where you start to identify with your captors. It's going to be a tough time for him to readjust, to come back, to even speak English again, which he probably hasn't been speaking much. And so he's going to need some of the best counseling that there is out there to re-enter into American society again.
Mike and Barbara and Nick, thank you all very much. Appreciate you weighing in on this and your expertise as well. Thank you. And don't go anywhere, because Bowe Bergdahl's former roommate will be joining me next. It's our breaking news this hour. An American soldier held captive by the Taliban for nearly 5 years is coming home. Just a short time ago, President Obama appeared with the mother and father of Sergeant Bowe Bergdahl. The president said it was his honor to be able to break the news to Bergdahl's parents that their son was coming home. A happy day at the White House Rose Garden. It's also a happy day in Bowe Bergdahl's hometown, Haley, Idaho. I want to talk now with Sherry Horton, who is in Haley right now. Sherry, you know Bowe. First tell me, I guess, how well do you know him? How do you know him? And you just saw his parents with the president. What'd you make of that?
Amazing. It's amazing just to even see them at the White House. We've all been dreaming about the day that the president and they got together and made this announcement. So it's just, for everyone in town, it's such an incredible, happy day. I met him a few years ago. He came into the dance studio and decided he wanted to try to do ballet, and became one of my very best students. And after that, we became very close friends. And at one point, he needed a place to live. I needed a roommate, and we were just the best of roommates and the best of friends.
And how much have you worried about him over these last 5 years?
It's been immense. It's never out of your mind. You just kind of hope that every day you get some kind of good news. You know, the videos we got were always reassuring, so that was always a nice positive something to put into our life, that we were still seeing proof of life videos. But we always were just hoping for this day. We have been every day for 5 years. So
I want to go back to that moment where his parents spoke from the White House Rose Garden, and I want to ask you about that after this.
Okay.
Everywhere. We will continue to stay strong for Bowe while he recovers. Thank you.
I'd like to say to Bowe right now, who's having trouble speaking English, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Zayabayem. I'm your father, Bowe. The people of Afghanistan, the same. Khalifa al-Thani, the complicated nature of this recovery will never really be comprehended. To each and every single one who affected this in this country, in the service branches, at the State Department, throughout the whole of American government, and around the world at international governments around the world, thank you so much. We just can't communicate the words this morning when we heard from the president. So we look forward to continuing the recovery of our son, which is going to be a considerable task for our family. And we hope that the media will understand that that will keep us very preoccupied in the coming days and weeks as he gets back home to the United States. Thank you all for being here very much.
So Sherry, let me ask you, I mean, you know Bo, you know his family. How will they manage to get through this as a family unit?
They are a very tight-knit family. They have been that way for as long as I've known them. Bo was homeschooled growing up, so he's very, very close to his parents through all the homeschooling and their vacations and everything. And they have been so strong throughout this entire ordeal. I know between what they're doing, and they're going to survive this with the close-knit community like we have here. Everyone in the town's very supportive of them, and they'll get through fine.
And what is the plan for when he finally does return back to Haley?
Well, strangely enough, we had already, every summer there is a rally for Bo with thousands of motorcycle riders, and it is scheduled for next weekend. And so we're very excited that instead of being an awareness rally, it's now going to be a celebratory rally. So we're already have plans in the making for a big party.
A lot to celebrate for sure. Sherry Horton, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.